She chose the rancher over her clan. What she did next stunned everyone. Jacob Harlan had spent most of his days tucked away on the remote edges of the dusty town of El Dorado, caring for his modest plot with the steady resolve of a man who favored the steady rhythm of earth, fields, and animals over the chaotic clamor of folks. He was known far and wide as the reserved rancher, the sort who dropped his eyes when addressed, gave a simple nod rather than a reply, and sidestepped trouble like a fellow easing around a coiled viper. For years, he toiled in quiet, repairing barriers, mending worn implements, and holding himself apart. But the evening he discovered her, a wounded Navajo woman, sprawled beside his stable, his world expanded into a form he'd never foreseen. Twilight had snagged the subtle gleam of steel by the stable entrance, and as Jacob drew nearer, he saw the form wasn't a forgotten gear or debris, but a figure huddled on the soil, drawing ragged breaths. Her shoulder was gashed, her shin abraded, and her locks, long and ebony as polished obsidian, tumbled wildly over her features. Without a thought for peril or fallout, Jacob scooped her up tenderly and bore her into his stable, settling her atop the mound of fresh straw set aside for young foals. He didn't know her name or the reason for her solitude, but he grasped enough to know she required aid. With unsteady fingers, he cleansed her injuries with water hauled from the spring and bound them using rags torn from a faded tunic. For the first time in ages, his voice rose above a murmur when he murmured, "You're secure here." She parted her lids just a sliver to glimpse him, but not enough to utter a word. For the following pair of days, Jacob concealed her. He fetched her meals, fresh water, and coverings, lingering close enough to ensure her ease, yet distant enough to respect her boundaries. She observed him with wary glances, studying his motions, soft, measured, ever courteous. On the fourth dawn, she at last voiced words, her tone gentle yet firm. "I am called Lyra." Jacob inclined his head, but she pressed on, picking up on his unease with talk. "You rescued me. The pursuers who hunted me, they took my brother's life. I fled until my legs gave out." Jacob gulped, uncertain how to answer, uncertain if he ought to. But she offered a slight curve of her lips, easing his burden. "You're not one for words, that's all right." In the days that followed, she mended gradually, yet her nearness awakened feelings Jacob had long kept buried. There were fleeting instants, her chuckle when he stumbled over a pail, the gratitude in her thanks each time he offered a heated compress, the resilience in her stare, even in frailty, that kindled a gentle glow in his still soul. Jacob strove not to dwell on what might come when she departed, but the notion lingered like an unwelcome guest. One dusk, as the fading light stretched shadows over the stable floor, she uttered the phrase he'd been dreading. "My kin will seek me out. They'll demand explanations. They'll seek reckoning." Jacob tensed, unclear if that spelled peril for him, but Lyra extended her reach, brushing his forearm with care. "Hold no dread. You preserved me. They'll understand this." He dipped his chin, though anxiety still twisted in his breast. The morning she could stand unaided, she positioned herself by the stable threshold, gazing over the expanse. "I have to depart," she murmured. Jacob swallowed, sensing the sharp ache of parting within. "Will you come back?" he ventured softly. She pivoted, her deep eyes warming. "If the winds permit it." She advanced, catching him off guard by resting her palm softly against his jaw. "You sheltered me with dignity. Such acts, I carry them always." And with that, she strode into the boundless plain, vanishing toward the horizon. Before he could summon the nerve to confess how profoundly he wished her to stay. Weeks slipped by, then months. Jacob slipped back into his habits, but all seemed altered. His stable rang too hollow. His nights dragged on too endlessly. And though he strove to persuade himself she'd merely resumed her path among her own, a piece of him lingered each sunrise, by the rail, yearning for her glimpse, if only briefly. What he couldn't foresee was that Lyra had shared his tale with her folk, with her elder, with the guardians who tended her. She spoke of the timid rancher who staked all to harbor her, who regarded her with courtesy unlike any from strangers. She described his mercy, his tenderness, his hush, that conveyed more than voices ever could. And the Navajo listened. They heeded closely, for Lyra was no ordinary soul. She was the kin of the elder, and her words held sway. In the lead-up to her homecoming, her band prepared for a trek, one that would carry them to Jacob Harlan's holding, not for reprisal, but for a turn far more unprovinciable. Jacob pressed on with his tending underneath the boundless vault of sky, oblivious that his choice to aid a hurt wanderer had sparked a current he could no longer halt. And as the thunder of hooves rumbled toward his spread, he would learn what that current had wrought. Jacob was scattering feed for the fowl when he sensed the earth quiver under his soles. At first he mistook it for far-off rumble, but the next shudder surged fiercer. He rose straight, peering into the open beyond the rails. A swelling haze of grit began to gather, broadening swiftly. His breath hitched when he grasped the noise wasn't the wild. It was horsemen. Scores of them. His thoughts leaped to every dread he'd interred. Raiders eyeing his acres. Outlaws raiding, or worse, the foes Lyra had escaped. His grip shook as he placed the pail aside, dabbing moisture from his forehead. The band drew nearer, and soon he spied the gleam of lances, the outlines of mounts, the ordered rank of riders bound by intent. He retreated a pace, pulse racing, only to halt as the haze cleared to unveil the reality. These were Navajo guardians, throngs of them, astride in a firm row, countenances grave, lances held in a shared emblem of might and honor. Jacob's knees buckled, though he willed himself upright. This bore no mark of assault. This was ritual. Still, the vision shook him deep. At the forefront, swinging down from a bay steed, was Lyra. Her bearing hit him fiercer than the host at her rear. She advanced with the poise he recalled, but now she bore a mantle of command he hadn't wholly noted afore. Her band regarded her with deference, poised for her cue. Jacob parted his lips to voice, but sounds snagged in his gullet. Lyra halted paces from him, her regard unwavering. "Jacob Harlan," she intoned with a serenity forged by resolve. "I shared with my kin how you preserved me, how you concealed me without bargain, without malice, without claim for recompense." Jacob fidgeted restlessly. "I merely did what honor called for." She curved her lips faintly. "And that is our purpose here." She raised her palm, cueing the guardians astern. They dipped their lances as one, a hush like breeze carving the breeze. Then the elder himself emerged, a seasoned figure with keen-set gaze and a bearing that hushed all. He scanned Jacob head to toe, then declared in a timbre that spanned the breath, "My kin owes you her breath, but she speaks of a bond beyond mere owing." Jacob colored, adrift on reply, adrift if Lyra had voiced what he wasn't braced to hear voiced. The elder went on, "In our ways, a woman selects not solely by tongue, but by deeds. She bid us stand beside her this day as she poses you a query." No Navajo woman inquires idly. Jacob turned to Lyra, pulse thundering in his ribs. She neared, her face clear of doubt or waver. "I came back because you lingered in me," she stated, her tone resolute. "I came back because in the hush of your stable, when you tended me sans question of cause, I beheld a spirit unseen in any hearth or hamlet." She extended, clasping his fingers, something unventured till now. "I come now with my band to ask if you'll weave your path with mine." Jacob stared, breathless in awe. You speak of wedlock," he breathed. Lyra inclined her head. "If your spirit echoes mine." He recalled the eves sleep evaded him, her image weighing so on his thoughts. He recalled yearning for her return, aware it bordered folly. He recalled the warmth of her touch on his face, the morn she parted. And now, the holding her, bold, true, unyieldingly devoted, his reply welled from his essence. "Yes," he uttered, timbre quivering, "if you'll claim me." The Guardians rearward stirred in a subdued hum of assent. Some dipped heads, others grinned faintly at the reserved rancher who'd just bloomed into far more than a solitary tiller of soil. The elder advanced, laying a palm on Jacob's flank. "Then you are one of ours," he proclaimed. "This day we celebrate not a tiller nor a fighter, but a joining, born of valor and mercy." Lyra clasped Jacob's hand with care. "You harbored me in your stable," she whispered. "Now, let me draw you into my realm with honor." For the first stretch in many a season, Jacob held his gaze steady, held his chin high, held firm sans retreat to quiet. He stood firm by her side as the Navajo Guardians raised their lances anew, not in threat, but in jubilee. And as the grits swirled about them, in that instant etched eternal, Jacob grasped that his days had shifted the moment he bore a stricken wayfarer into his stable. She had come back not for refuge, but for him. And now, encircled by her kin, he ventured into a tomorrow once undreamed, with the woman he once shielded and would now proudly uphold for the span of his life.